Well, it's been 27 years of democracy, and today South Africa is commemorating Reconciliation Day. We've decided then to look at how far we've come in bridging the gap of social cohesion. South Africa's efforts in ensuring social cohesion and nation building have once again come to the fore, as they do every year, to help us better understand the relevance of the day. This year especially, I'm joined by former Statistician-General of South Africa, Dr. Pali Lehohla, and law professor at the University of Stellenbosch, Thuli Madonsela, is expected to join us. We're expecting shortly, but for now, Dr. Lehohla, a very good evening to you. Let me begin with you. Is there a single focus that we should have in the country at the moment when we reflect on social cohesion and reconciliation?
Yes, indeed. I think the focuses, the foci are multiple, but certainly I think the key issue around why we reconcile should be about how we disrupt the legacy of apartheid and colonialism, which has bedeviled particularly the black people with hunger, poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And that's the single focus, I think, that we should have. We should be focusing on how do we reconcile on the question of development. And the development, particularly of the black people, so that we can live harmoniously with our counterparts who are white, so and so. So I think that harmonious living together without all these symptoms of discrimination must be our focus on reconciliation. So economic reconciliation is very, very fundamental.
Can reconciliation exist without an evening out of the economic scales, especially along a racial line?
It cannot exist for as long as those racial scars are in our face. And of course, it's been demonstrated that vulnerabilities are so severe, and COVID has just unraveled and shown that those vulnerabilities have to be dealt with. If we don't deal with them, we'll never be reconciled as a nation.
Dr. Lehohla,
and that's
pardon me,
mainly for those who are rich and who are poor. Yes, I'm saying.
Please continue, sir.
Yes, I'm saying that's very, very fundamental. If we can't reconcile on the fundamentals of creation of human life, which is material benefits to life, if those fundamentals are not in place, reconciliation is impossible.
All right.
But it's an objective that we must strive for.
I would like to pick up on the point that you made about the vulnerabilities which have been further exposed by COVID-19. Many of them, I think we already knew, people realizing just along issues around job security, a place to stay for many people in this country. When we started having conversations about isolating, for example, many people who are either wealthy or have never lived in a township, an informal settlement, did not realize that something as basic as isolating during the COVID pandemic for a lot of black poor people in this country wasn't even easy to do.
Oh yes, it was impossible. How do you isolate in a shack? I mean, 14% in South Africa on average stay in these shacks. And the concentration actually is more severe and deep in the Western Cape and Gauteng, where upwards of 22% of the population live under those conditions. So yes, they might be distant in terms of mind, but they are very close in terms of just the physical distance. If you take Sandton and the township nearby, you realize that there is no distance between those two. Yet, we do not know about those.
Is it safe to say then that in South Africa today, the biggest challenge, especially as far as dividing society, is now economic strife ahead of racism, which has been the longer ongoing conversation to a degree?
It's always been economic strife. It's always been inequality in economics. Race has been a lever for doing so. But at the bottom and at the end of the day, it's always been economic strife. That has to be sorted out.
I'm told Advocate Thuli Madonsela, Professor Thuli Madonsela, is now able to join us. Prof, a very good evening to you. Thank you for joining Dr. Lehohla and I. I was looking at a quote attributed to you in one of the articles published today, where you said, as long as there's injustice, there can never be sustainable peace anywhere. That suggests that South Africa has a long couple of years ahead of us.
Absolutely. Thank you for the privilege, and I'm sorry for the technical mistake. And good evening to Dr. Pali.
Prof, good evening.
I do agree with you, and I still believe in the code that peaceful coexistence has to be based on justice. That has been the truth since antiquity. Among those who believed in Ubuntu, how we related to each other was on the basis of being equals and on the basis of being just to each other. The same thing happens in Athens. When they invented the concept of democracy, was primarily because there was no peace. There was conflict because others felt that they were not being treated as equals. And therefore, if we want true reconciliation and sustainable reconciliation, we have to address the issue of inequality, particularly legacy inequality.
Mm-hmm. And are we using the right instruments, Prof, to address that?
Partly we are using the right instruments because the greatest instrument we have for advancing equality and reconciliation is the Constitution, which has a preamble that says we are adopting it as a basis for healing the divisions of the past and establishing a new society that is based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. That's a society where everyone's life is improved and everyone's potential is freed. So that instrument remains the same, and it has basic entitlements for everyone, and it enjoins government to advance these human rights and freedoms so that they may be enjoyed by everyone on an equal basis. But when it comes to implementation, two mistakes have happened. There are those who just thought poor people, which is basically pretty much most black people, were only entitled to socio-economic rights from government. They didn't understand that the Constitution is an instrument for disrupting inequality among us as private persons. And therefore, for example, when it comes to land, we can't invent new land. The land that was taken away has to be redistributed. But if you expect government to pay exorbitantly for all of it, it will take many lifetimes before you can have equality. So that was a mistake, that we reduced the advancement of equal enjoyment of human rights to socio-economic rights. The second thing is, I think Dr. Pali may have spoken to you about, is the failure to use statistics, disaggregated statistics, when we are planning laws, to make sure that those laws do not work against our goal of advancing equality, to make sure that every law reduces existing inequalities and even pushes us to greater equality.
And Dr. Lehohla, this has been something you've been spoken to and spoken about for years now, the fact that there's available data, available understanding, critical understanding of what the issues are and the solutions needed, yet there isn't a move forward. Do you get a sense that things are changing at all, that people are starting to listen, especially those with the power to make a difference, government?
Well, I think when people are desperate, the listening is listening to almost pieces of wood that have been broken into one's ears. So that's the problem with desperation. And I think we are in a desperate moment at the moment. I mean, with COVID, with everything that is happening, we are clutching at straws. And we have wasted a lot of time instead of using the time adequately to look into the future. Professor Madonsela, as a chair of social justice, is a great advocate of I mean, the act of planning is actually walking the space, the virtual space, in looking at what is possible and how that which is possible can be handled. And having proven that it is possible, then we start implementing. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that process in South Africa. The short-termism, the shoot first, aim after, is what has devastated us. And the outcomes are not known. They are not known as to how they get achieved. And we hope that we can achieve them. So the hope that is not etched in processes that are valid and how you compensate for effects, negative effects to others, is the biggest problem that we have.
And Professor Madonsela,
when we do not use the evidence and hope that things will just come as they come, is a big problem in the country. It continues to be so.
I want to bring in Professor Madonsela once again, Prof, and pick up on the other sentiment about why the available data, research, and other evidence is not being used to reach ultimate solutions. Some say the problem is that those in charge are too preoccupied with bettering their own lives, lining their own pockets, basically too selfish to care.
Well, I think that's a very harsh judgment. Personally, I worked in government and I didn't use statistics to predict the future. We use statistics to understand the problem, but we never really had the science of using statistics to estimate how each law that we're planning was going to impact on different groups. Let's say just older persons, young people, black people, rich people, poor people, etc. So for me, it's a science, and I'm excited that Dr. Pali Lehohla is part of the team now. That is a multidisciplinary team. It involves game designers, statisticians, data scientists, engineers, to think in two ways, to think futuristically. Every time you plan something, you immediately measure how is the future likely to unfold. It's almost like scenario planning, but here, much more micro than macro. The second thing that we're teaching people is systems thinking, that if you're intervening in one area, don't assume that that is going to work in isolation. Let's say you pass a law on how education is going to function. For example, during democracy, we decided that schools should have governing boards and the intake of schools should be restricted geographically. But had we paused to think about what would be the implications, we would have understood that we are locking apartheid into the new democracy. What people could achieve using apartheid laws, we're now giving them permission to achieve using the new laws through leveraging existing social and economic disparities and spatial segregation.
Professor Thuli Madonsela, Dr. Pali Lehohla, always good to speak to you both, even on this Reconciliation Day. Thank you both for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
A privilege.